One of our Hello Freedom community members, Emily, shared something in the community recently that just stopped me in my tracks. She wrote, "There are so many more valuable things we can do with our time rather than obsessing over the latest diet or if we have a completely flat stomach. God has such beautiful things planned for us, y'all. If we put all the energy into growing our faith and serving others that we do when worrying over our bodies, man, what a difference we could make for the kingdom." Emily, I felt that so deeply. Friend, maybe you did too. And if so, there is a place for you inside Hello Freedom, a community of women pointing each other toward Jesus and walking this out together. You can come join us for free at findingbalance.com/community. Hey friends, it's Chrissy Kirkman, and welcome back to the Old School Food Freedom Podcast, where we are about to kick it as old school as it gets with how God created us to live, and that is free from dieting, diet culture, free from eating disorders, free from shame of any kind, free to live as God would want us to live and with Jesus. So today we have a really good episode. It's one that we all are going to connect with, I'm sure. It's the power of narrative. And so we're going to be learning about narrative identity theory. Do not press stop. I know that sounds very scholarly, but just know it's stories, right? How to discern which voice we're actually listening to in our own lives and why that matters so much for those of us navigating eating disorders, disordered eating, excessive exercise, and body image struggles. And here's the best news. Our sweet Jesus is in the business of rewriting stories with love. So that's what we're going to do today. And to talk about this, I have literally feels like a long lost friend. Like we were in high school together, but we just literally met like a month ago, if that, right? So this is Dr. Eva Bleeker. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. I am happy to be here for so many reasons, Chrissy. Thank you for inviting me. And I just want to agree with you from way, way down in my 1990s heart that it feels like you have been my best friend for 30 years, maybe more. It's just been really special for me to learn about what you do. I wish that I had had what you do 30 and 35 and 40 years ago. It's a delight to be invited into a community that is celebrating the healing that is available and the healing that God longs to give to us. So thanks for having me. It's fun to be here.
Yeah, and I'm the same way. And we hear that a lot. So many people come to us and say, man, I wish this was available back when I was really starting to get these mixed signals and mixed messages. And, especially the 90s, it was extreme and it feels like it's getting better in some ways, but we're still navigating it, right? We still
For sure
live on Earth. Well, friends, let me tell you a little bit about Dr. Eva Bleeker. She is known to many as Chaplain Eva, and she's a trusted speaker, trainer, and mentor in the growing field of narrative, theory, and story work. She's a board-certified professional chaplain with a decade of experience in acute care hospitals. She now serves as Chair of Chaplaincy and Pastoral Care at Denver Seminary. Her research sits at the intersection of pastoral care, narrative identity, and practical theology. She holds a Master of Science in Narrative Medicine from Columbia University, 2 Master of Arts degrees from Dallas Theological Seminary, and a doctorate from Baylor University. Sick 'em bears. Eva and her husband, Josh, live on Colorado's Front Range with a rescue dog named Ramsey Ruth, which is so cute, who is actually in charge at their house, of course. Do you narrate for your dog?
I mean, I didn't know that I couldn't. So yes, we are always externalizing her thoughts. She has a special voice quality that comes out. I mean, I think that that's an obligation when you rescue a dog.
Again, the deep friendship connection just got deeper. That's all I do is narrate for dogs and animals. So yes, okay, fantastic. Ramsey Ruth, I love it. Okay, so we always kick off this show with a question of what old school item or experience do you miss from back in the day? Can't wait to hear this.
This was fun for me. And I did think of some items, but I'm going with an experience, and the experience that I miss is appointment TV. So like when my friend from high school had cable and I didn't, and there wasn't like a way to record live TV or anything. You had to be at Stacy's house at 8:00 on Thursday so that you could watch fill in the blank, because that was your only opportunity. It's not like it's going to be on later. You have to watch it when it's on. My family did not have cable, but I would go over and a group of us would sort of like pile onto a sofa or a water bed, which might also fit in this category, and watch, like, of course, the things that aired on Thursday nights, like Friends and ER. But my favorite show from that era was just a single season of a show called My So-Called Life.
I knew you were going to say My So-Called Life.
How did you know it?
Jordan Catalano. Can we stop for a second?
Uh-huh.
I mean, I know that this is not the most appropriate show, but the soundtrack was fantastic. Everything about it was so 90s.
It's Claire Danes as a redhead.
Yes.
And it is the celebration of the oversized flannel shirt.
And the Jordan Catalanos of the world.
Indeed.
Oh my gosh, yes. This is fantastic. Also, something I need to say right now is that we quickly discovered that we are both class of 96. So we just instantly, we're all striking chords. It's super fun. So let's start there. Let's start with, like, we're class of 96. Share your story with us. You know, what your experience was with diet culture back then, or messages you heard. Let's start there.
It's a great starting place. And I just want to say before I get into the narrative of my history that it's really been a blessing to me to see the distance between where I am now and where I was maybe 30 years ago when we were all fixing to graduate in about 6 weeks. I had such unexamined but powerful hatred for a body that was a gift from the Lord, that worked well. You know, all the systems are functional. But I just completely internalized this concept that I was unacceptable, that I was disgusting, that the approval of other people, men and women, young and old, although certain categories seem to have more power than others for me and in the research, I did not know how deeply some of the things that were happening in my family culture were translating directly into shame for me. And so I didn't even know how shame functioned in a adolescent's heart at the time. But again, without examination, I completely subscribed to a global belief that the only thing about me that mattered was the number on the scale and the size stitched into the back of my jeans, Guess jeans, preferably, and maybe Z's.
Z Cavaricci, is that what you're talking about? Z Cavaricci? Yes. Oh my gosh. Okay.
I didn't have any of those, but that was part of the shaming, right? All this externalization. I'll talk later as our conversation develops, Chrissy, about how I understand what was happening in this present moment, looking back then. But at the time, even though I could have given a fairly sophisticated articulation of the gospel for a teenager, with chapter and verse provided, and an understanding of human dignity based in bearing the image of God, and I could say some things. But there was such a cavern between what I really think I believed to be true about the love of God in my story and the source of value for a teenage girl. There was no bridge over this chasm, canyon, cavern of self-loathing and unmitigated shame. And when I looked in the mirror, which I tried not to because I didn't like what I saw there, but when I did, I could only see hatred being reflected back at me. And some of those messages came from inside my family system. Some of those messages came from the wave of diet culture that was part of our adolescence. And I think some of it just comes straight from evil.
Yeah.
And it's so powerful. And I know you and I have identified with this idea that like the reason the darkness keeps throwing it at us is because it seems to work every time. So when I think back to the Eva that was 13 and 14 and 15 and 16 and 17 and just sort of, graph her self-loathing, there's fluctuation, but over time, the Lord has walked me out of that. To say that I've arrived anywhere, I have bad days like anybody else. And I really want to celebrate the changes and the redemption and transformation that the Lord has brought to me through a lot of different modes, through different people. It has made me feel so vulnerable to think back to my younger self in preparing to have this conversation with you, but in a way that I feel so protected and sustained, and I think even celebrated by the Lord. And before we sort of change subjects, I just want to thank you for inviting me to do this, because it's given me a moment to slow down and appreciate the highly personalized kindnesses that God has brought into my story that I think probably, for sure, figuratively and maybe literally saved my life.
Yeah, of course.
I know you know what I'm talking about, and I know that the people listening to us know what that's like.
Yeah, it's a connection that we get. We walk in different shoes, but it's similar paths often. Okay, Eva, I know one of the things that's true of your life now is that you're a professor. And so today you're going to share some ideas that come from your work as a scholar. Let's start that.
I am excited to do that. And I want to take us in several different directions. I want to talk about some of the theological things that are true, that were part of the Lord's mercy right in the place where we're talking today. I want to talk about some of the theory that has helped me understand the mercy that I received, and then also talk a little bit about the family that I was a part of and still am as we're walking along. So it's fun. I just want to tell your audience, Chrissy, that we are recording this on the Thursday before Easter. So today is Monday, Thursday, and it is just an extraordinary day to be thinking about the decision made within the Godhead for the second person to become a human being. And when I'm thinking about that in relation to Maundy Thursday, lots of our Christian brothers and sisters around the world already have, and those here in the U.S. later this evening might go to like a foot washing service. And they might read the upper room discourse, Jesus giving his goodbye message to the people he was closest to during his life on earth. And when I think about that, the part of what is so extraordinary to me in that story, even as we're talking, I'm trying to slow myself down to really be connected to what I am saying. It is the mark of love that the Lord took on flesh. He made it possible for himself to die. This embodiment. And then on this evening, he does what a slave does, gets on the floor, does this thing that is unsavory, but offers so much dignity to the body of the disciples. So, Jesus is emptying himself, however we might understand that theologically, and he is humbling himself. And so today is a great day to think about that, because one of the first things that broke open the cage that I was in my brain was realizing that the Lord was not only interested in my memorizing of verses or the moral things that were true about me, but that his perfect love included dignity for my 16-year-old puberty suffering body, and that he made it out of love, and that he wanted me to experience him in that fleshiness of self, and that the best proof of that is Jesus becoming one of us, just like us. And so it's just an interesting day to think about the redemption of the body through the sacrifice of Jesus' body. And it just raises up what it means to live as a human being. So something about that group of concepts that Jesus is a person who has a body, and it's not just like mine because it's a resurrected body now, but it sure was on the night that he was washing the disciples' feet. And so it was a radical idea for me that my torso, or whatever part of me that I might have been fixating on and deciding was worthy only of scorn, worthy only to be judged negatively, was shared by Jesus. Like it's so dignifying and so powerful for me in that sort of late adolescence, early adulthood space to feel free to own that dignity for myself. And it was the beginning of several things happening concurrently, intellectually and relationally for me that sort of gave me proof that I was being invited into the free space, that I had belonging in freedom, and that I could claim a permanent seat at this table with a God who was willing and excited to be in a body like mine. So my theological framework just gave me this opportunity to honor the embodied person, me being one of them. And it was such a drastic contrast with this unexamined self-loathing that I had just taken on, swallowed, painted all over myself as a female who, grew up in adolescence and through early adulthood with truly almost nothing except pure loathing for the way that I was made.
That's so tender.
Yeah.
And I feel like so many of us get that really like to the core, understand. And there are still days today, current day, that I'm struggling with self-loathing. And now in perimenopause, I'm going through these hormonal shifts, just like I went through as a teenager, but it's a little different because we're 30 plus years older now, right? But the surges, the ups and downs are still the same. And there are days where the self-loathing is a true battle.
Yeah. So, that self-loathing, it's a story that we're telling ourselves.
Yeah.
So, Chrissy, you named my theory. It's called narrative identity theory. And I usually just call it story support because that's what it is. So the theory has so many things about it that I love. Sometimes I say, this is the gospel hiding in a psychological theory because there are so many true things that a psych theory allows us to say and to back up with like data and research and stuff. So the theory starts at this place that says we are story-oriented beings, that we are always making a story out of our experiences. So when we think about where we are, we're in a certain life stage. I have heard that the fluctuations of people our age are actually more dramatic than a person in adolescence. Like, it's bonkers. I don't know why we don't.
That hits right now. I don't remember it ever being this hard.
Yes. Well, you're probably right. Like, we are out of alignment with the support that we get for that first huge change. And then nobody even is like, by the way, here's what's coming, baby.
Yeah.
here we are. We're in this life stage. We're telling ourselves a story because we're always telling ourselves a story. So we might be thinking about what might it mean if we decided to go to our 30th class reunion, and we tell ourselves a story about how I'm going to feel like this when everybody else is going to be looking like that. And I'm uniquely locked inside a story of shame, and I will be judged in a specific way. All of these things have narrative attributes. They are stories that we internalize. So we are always making storied meaning out of our experience. And something I love about the story frame is that, of course, we're all created by the storyteller, capital T, capital S.
Yes.
He likes to do things like call himself an author. It's so fun. Okay. When we're telling ourselves a story, there's 3 pieces of the story. It's the reconstructed past. The reason we say it like that is that nobody remembers the past as it actually happened.
Whoa, pause. Nobody remembers the past as it actually happened. It's really true.
It's really true.
Oh my gosh.
I do hope that it is a place where we can give ourselves mercy. Like, since we're celebrating today being part of the class of 96, the way that we remember our high school experience is not accurate. And the way that we are remembering, maybe the impact of attention from other people or what they thought about us is probably slanted to the negative. So that's the reconstructed past. And then the second component is the imagined future. So again, probably not super accurate, but so when we imagine, okay, in a few months, I might go to this high school class reunion, and this is what it will feel like. And this is what I will look like. And these are the emotional burdens that I would carry into that experience. So that's the imagined future. You can see how they relate to each other. And then the third component then is how we're experiencing both of those stories in the present. This is such a great day for us to talk about this, right?
Yeah.
You want to say something.
Like, I'm just processing through this. Like, I don't think I've heard it that way. And it makes so much sense. And it felt really heavy because I'm thinking the things I've thought about the past, the things I'm almost projecting in the future, telling these stories. And here I am, boots on the ground, stressed out by both sides.
Yes.
In my present. And 1, I can't do anything to change the past. And 2, this stuff in the future, I don't want to say I'm just making up stories, but like it hasn't even happened yet. And it's not necessarily even going to happen. I don't know what's going to happen, right? So like all of a sudden that feels really super heavy.
Yeah, it can feel super heavy. And an important piece of the research, I think, especially when we are having this conversation in this community, when we are pushing back hard against bad stories that we internalized about ourselves, hopefully this feels compassionate. But within the research of the theory, painful stories, like a story about shame or vulnerability or grief or suffering, a hard story like that has greater impact or greater potential to shape the story that you're telling yourself than like a happy, lighthearted story. Those stories that are part of our past in relation to our body image, in relation to disordered eating, that just when they come up for us and they just slice us to the heart, that's what we're talking about. That a story like that of being shamed in public or insulted by someone who should have been kind, that kind of story has way more muscle in the story that we're telling ourselves than like when someone says, hey, you look great today, baby. So when I teach that piece, Chrissy, usually the intuitive thing that happens in the room is like, we all knew that. We just didn't know that it was backed up by research. That's a little bit of bad news, but there's actually enormous hope and agency in this theory. It is, like I said, sometimes I feel like it's the gospel hiding in science. So people who learn to tell the hard stories, people who say, I just can't live isolated inside this story anymore, and I need to talk to fill in the blank, a really good friend, a pastor or chaplain or counselor or a youth pastor. That was a big one for me. But when we find someone who has the guts to enter a story like that with us and witness it without judging it and help to bear it, these incredible things start happening. They are truly transformative when our stories of pain are witnessed well. Doesn't need to be by a paid professional. It can be by the girl you go shopping with, whatever. These enormous possibilities open up, and they sound like Jesus words, but they are rising out of the theory. So the first thing that happens is called redemptivity, which is also a great word for this week, everything that we're celebrating. Within the theory, redemptivity means the capacity, like the ability to narrate suffering with mission and transformation. So another way to say it might be like telling the story and giving it a good work to do. And then the other thing that happens is called generativity. And that means the ability to have concern and commitment for the well-being of other people. So when our hard stories get a really good listener, they can transform into the center of our mission, a place where shame is totally dispelled. And then we can put that hard story to work for somebody else, which, Chrissy, I think that's what your whole life is.
I was thinking, okay, that feels like everything I've done and am doing at Finding Balance. It's me praying from the circle maker, praying circles around. I mean, just really praying. It doesn't have to be the circle maker, but that was my story. I was reading the circle maker, started praying circles around like, Lord, I feel like a prisoner in this body. I know you have more for me. I used to think it was just, well, you got to lose a certain amount of pounds before God can really find you effective and that you can really do any kingdom work for him. You just got to look the part. He was just never saying that. And when I saw that it was something totally different, that had nothing to do with my body size, it was heart work and story work and like truth work. And I did the thing that was step forward with him and show up with him. I wasn't alone in it. And so every time I took a step toward freedom and toward the truth with him, I was thinking and praying and saying, Lord, let this help somebody else, never knowing I would ever be in this seat, in this position, making this difference, helping people in 70 countries hear this message. Come on. That is not Chrissy Kirkman. That's Jesus. That's how he works. So yay. Thank you for that.
Yeah, you are a perfect example of what happens. Like when you're reading the circle maker, and if we were going to like put the language on there, so like you realized you were telling yourself a bad story and that Jesus had a better story and he wanted to tell it to you. And then he wanted to tell it through you for other people. It goes on this mission for other people. So I'm going to read you a quote from the research. Narrators, meaning people who are telling their hard stories, narrators who find redemptive meaning in suffering and adversity tend to enjoy higher levels of mental health, well-being, and maturity. So like, I think that's a story that you just told. When we accept the invitation to be vulnerable in the exact place where we feel the most shame, and we choose a listener who's trustworthy, right? Like you have to be worth my story. But when we share that hard thing with vulnerability to someone who can hold that narrative with incredible strength and tenderness at the same time, the psych data says we get healthier mentally and we feel more well-being and that we actually become more mature people. So that's pretty extraordinary.
Yeah, I think that's incredible. Can I pause and say, Friend, if you hear this and you think, God only selects a few people to do work like that, and I'm not Chrissy, and no, you're not Chrissy, or I can't be like that. I am a regular, everyday, ordinary girl that God used. And because I was also willing to say yes and willing to go there. So I'm saying, please don't just think that anyone here is on a pedestal. Like, this is a story for you. The story of freedom is for you. The enemy wants you to think that God couldn't use you, or you're too broken, or you're not together yet. How many times did I struggle in thinking, you've got to get it together before God can use you? He says, come as you are. He wants to meet you in the brokenness, the broken places, to do that redemptive work. So I just offer you that hope today that you hear this and you get and feel a glimmer of what might he do with all the free time that I didn't have to worry about food or feel like I was hating myself because my body, my hips, my stomach, whatever it is, doesn't look like someone else, or that I can't be in front of other people, or whatever the lie from the pit of hell is. What could he do in that place? Because we were asked that question through our Lasting Freedom program. When I went through that course, that was one of the questions. What could you do? What might God do with you? And I thought that was a very exciting thing. And as I'm answering that question, I was still having the doubts of but I know I'm going to have to do more work on myself. And really, I was still secretly thinking that meant shrinking my body. And it just flat out didn't. In fact, my body has increased instead of decreased. And I'm still working through some of those thoughts and some of those things. And it's not about me. It's about God and his truth and his word and his message and freedom. And so I just pray that you'd be encouraged today to just not give up on yourself and just know that God's with you.
Boy, that is such a powerful word, Chrissy. One other thought that I think might be important to share right in that place where you just said such redemptive things is that another thing that's true inside this theory is that you can't do it by yourself.
Yep.
So my experience, which I think is probably universal, maybe there are exceptions to this, but usually the bad stories that we tell ourselves about our physical bodies are isolating stories. Like, we withdraw, we develop patterns that are secrets, and it is a project that we're trying to do alone. And the truth that comes out of this work, this narrative identity work, this story support work, is that it is an act of co-creation. The healing work only can be done with somebody else. And we would hope, of course, that the first participant is that we invite Jesus into that space. But boy, being face to face with somebody who can look at you and speak loving kindness and dispel lies and say, that is not true of you. And to say it with gentleness instead of that harsh rebuke. The story that we're telling ourselves, right, is that I'm in trouble and I don't know why, all that bad story. The seedbed, like the garden where the good stories grow, is community, supportive community.
Everything you just described, this is what you find at Finding Balance in our prayer groups. This is what you find in our Hello Freedom community. This is happening, actively happening daily. I will say this, since we've launched our community, it was pretty quiet in the beginning because no one wants to be the first to go. And it's kind of awkward and you don't know people. Can I trust these people? There's 76 people in the Connect free tier already, right? And this has been open a month and a half. So it's growing rapidly, but women are starting to find that there is safety here and they're going to be met with gentleness and kindness and love. They're not going to be criticized. They're not going to look like some freak because so many of us have gone through similar things and we get you. We just get you. But the thing that resonates already is that you will be pointed to Jesus. Again, obviously we're all shame-free here. We're not going to shame you. And it's not a shame. It's just, what might Jesus say about that? Or let's check in with Jesus. What might he be saying? So anyway, everything you just described. Totally what we're doing at Finding Balance. So friend, if you need someplace like that, come check us out, findingbalance.com.
One thing that I had on my heart to share in this community where we are focusing on the particular struggles of women, I just had no idea, Chrissy, how powerful the negative messages inside my family culture were, how strong the story I was telling myself about my body was, and that there were the sources of those stories had a lot to do with my dad. So again, in this same season of my life where I felt the good shepherd sort of calling my name and inviting me out of this cage that I was inside, I ran into a couple of books, ideas in the books that were freeing for me because they helped me tell a better story. So the first source, he's a family doctor and he's also a psychologist named Leonard Sachs. And Dr. Sachs published this book called Girls on the Edge. And it was such an important read for me because it let me tell a true story to myself about the messages that I had received through my family of origin. So his research would say that the most powerful or one of the most powerful influences on a developing girl's body image is the way that her father regards women's bodies. So if there are any dads out there listening to us, please know you have incredible strength in relation to your little girl's mental health and what she will think and feel about the gift of her body. You can lift her up or you can destroy her. So it was a complicated thing for me to learn, Chrissy, because in one way, it made me angry and it made me feel vulnerable in a way that I didn't even realize that I was vulnerable. But it also let me get a hold of that story. Like, oh, the criticism that I heard of female athletes or the comments that I heard about women's bodies when we're grocery shopping or whatever that might be. If I can get a hold of that story, I can reject it and tell myself a better story. That was a really huge piece for me to say, I don't have to endorse these messages. I am free to reject them. That's part of the theory, right? Is that if you can get a hold of the story that you're telling, you can change it. You can tell yourself a better story, this redemptive story.
If you've been wondering if your struggles with food are normal or if you need help, but you're just not sure where to start, we have created a brand new free eating issues check-in just for you. So this is a confidential tool that helps you understand your relationship with food and eating. And when you're done, you'll get instant, personalized results showing where you are now and what kind of support might help you. Plus, we're going to connect you with Christ-centered resources matched to your specific needs. So this just takes about 10 minutes, and it could be the brave first step toward the freedom you're seeking. So if you are ready to find out where you stand, take the Eating Issues Check-in at FINDINGbalance.com.
The other scholar who is a pastor, he's a scholar and a pastor, his name is Edward Wimberly. This sentence in a book that I read was also one of those moments of just pivot. So Dr. Wimberly's writing is about myths that we internalize. It's very similar to the concept of the story that we tell ourselves and examine. And he talks so much about the myth of perfection. Like we don't have to be taught that we should try to perfect ourselves instead of letting Jesus do the work in us and just being delighted that we don't have to do the work. So he writes about the myth of perfection in a book called Recalling Our Own Stories. And these couple of sentences, same kind of process where I thought, I can make that truth my own and act on it. He said that research shows that there is a crucial time in the life of every young girl when she decides whether to sacrifice her sense of self in order to get along in relationships. And at adolescence, a shift takes place. They force themselves to become silent in conformity to the dominant images of what it means to be feminine. I was reading this in a pastoral training course. It was not about women and their bodies, but it was just such a gift to discover, oh, somebody went ahead of me and used their intellectual ability to say, this is a normal thing. It's not a good thing. But now you can offer compassion back to younger Eva, and you can flip the choice that you made to conform to an image that society is telling you is the only source of value. And you can find your value in being made in the image of God and worshiping Jesus, the image of the invisible God. Sometimes my brain wants to do the problem solving. So these wise brothers and sisters out there who have done the arduous work of writing things down and putting them in books, which is not something that is very easy to do. I just feel like that also is part of that community of co-creation, to be able to recognize your pain in somebody else's research, in somebody else's pastoral care, get a hold of that story and then tell a better story. When I was in those experiences, I didn't have the language of the theory yet, but I did have the experience of being gently taken by the hand and walked out to freedom.
Beautiful.
Praise the Lord.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm so happy for you. That's really exciting. And friends, I pray that this is one of those episodes that I feel like I would be listening to multiple times and pausing and taking notes, because some of it's like, you got to let it sink in. You got to sit with it with Jesus. Like, he was already showing me pictures, like images in my brain of like some of the ways I was misled, or my reconstructed past, the imagined future, like those things. I mean, I was seeing some things like, oh, these are some areas that they are unhealed and need some attention. Not shameful. Like, I don't even feel shame about it. I'm just like, oh, this is an awareness and this is an illumination for a deeper, like, continued freedom, like a deeper level of freedom. Love
Yes.
that.
The way that God breaks into our stories is shining light in dark places.
So good. Well, how would you like to wrap up this episode and this topic?
As we're wrapping this up, Chrissy, I want to make sure that I haven't given the impression to anybody who's listening that I have crossed some kind of invisible line, and like that I don't have days where my thoughts are dark. I do have ups and downs, and that's not failing. That's being human. But I also want to just insist on the possibility that we can live differently, that when we are telling ourselves a story that a human body is worth dying for, that a human body is worth resurrecting permanently to live in a perfect human form, that can help us live better now, to live freer, to live balanced now. So I'm always careful to not project an idea that I've arrived somewhere that somebody else isn't.
And thank you, because with your credentials, our brains might think that that's true. And thank you for just being transparent and relatable.
Yes. Yes. Let's just remind ourselves that there are a lot of educated fools in the world. There are lots of people with degrees who are not living with wisdom. That's just basic. We all have equal value and dignity. That's an important thing to say as we're concluding. I think also getting in the rhythm of asking, what story am I telling myself, is a muscle that builds. You get better at it over time, at slowing down and saying, like, is that a true story or is that a bad story? What's a better story? What is the Jesus story?
Jesus story. What is the Jesus story? Love that. Hey, friends, you can find links to connect with Dr. Eva Bleeker in the show notes. Eva, thank you for being here. Thank you for going there with us. Thank you for talking about this in such a gentle way. Nothing felt shameful to me, and I'm so grateful for that. And I can't wait to have you back on the show.
Oh, I'll be here.
Thank you for listening to the Old School Food Freedom Podcast. For over 20 years, Finding Balance has been helping people walk in freedom by discovering where Jesus fits into their struggles with food and body image. If you want more biblical truth and encouragement, head on over to FINDINGbalance.com and subscribe to our free daily vitamin devotional. While you're there, explore our Christ-centered Lasting Freedom online course and small group tools. You can help keep this ministry going by donating today at FINDINGbalance.com. See you next time. The content in this podcast is for informational purposes only and is not intended to diagnose, treat, or prescribe a particular course of action. If you have or suspect you may have an eating disorder, please consult your healthcare provider. If you desire to receive faith-based care, visit ChristianTreatmentFinder.com to browse professionals with a Kingdom campaign against eating disorders.